Thank you, Michael. Thanks for that introduction, and thank you very much for inviting us back again to present to you another one of our projects in Derbyshire. Hopefully, I'm going to try and share my screen. I'm hoping that everybody can see that now.
Yes.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you.
Looking good.
Good. Okay. So tonight we want to share with you a little bit about the building that we're looking at here, which is the Ada Belfield Centre and Belper Library. This was actually completed last summer and was certainly a labour of love for the County Council, who had, I think it had been some 8 or 9 years in the making. Our involvement actually came through an OG procurement process. We were selected from 6 other architects through design competition back in February 2015. So it's been a little bit of a labour of love for ourselves also. And we actually issued the 12-month defect schedule only last week. So hopefully. Okay, so we've broken the presentation down into 5 sectors really to try and give a logical path through the design process. We'll start with an understanding of the requirements of the building itself. The building itself is split into 2 key parts. One is the new public library in Belper, and the other one is for residents living with dementia. So I think we start off with really saying we need to establish what the design requirements are for this development. And it's really imperative that we have an understanding of what the needs are for the residents. Dementia itself as a term is an umbrella term for a progressive condition. It's obviously is a condition that affects cognitive processes, and it actually can be broken down into a number of conditions, the most well-known one being Alzheimer's. Symptoms themselves for dementia include the loss of memory, mood changes, communication issues, and just general problems of carrying out everyday tasks independently. So whatever we can do in the design to make people's lives easier is obviously beneficial. The statistics speak for themselves really. There's been extensive research undertaken to understand the scale of dementia in the UK, and it's currently estimated that 850,000 people are currently living with dementia, but that is actually set to almost double to 1.6 million by 2040. If you look into those figures a little bit closer, that actually equates to 1 in 14 currently of over 65s, and that will rise to 1 in 10 people living with dementia. So the data really underpins the necessity for greater central government action and investment in social care. Published in February, the All-Party Parliamentary Group Task Force published a new document which we were part of and contributed to, The process lasted for 8 months. It investigated future of housing and care for older people and how people can live as long as possible in their own homes through a range of means, including policy change, care, better design. A number of inquiry sessions were undertaken in that 8-month process with leaders in the field, also parliamentarians, to contribute to the investigation. And from the perspective of care management also, 4 inquiry sessions were undertaken. The front cover of this document may look a little bit familiar to anybody that saw our last presentation, because that's actually our Meadow View development up in the Darley Dales. So we were delighted when the document was published to find that that building was actually being used on the front cover. The report itself focused on 5 key areas. It made 20 key issues and it raised in excess of 40 recommendations back to government. One aspect that was looked at within the report were the HAPPI design principles. This is actually the 10th anniversary year of the HAPPI design principles, which for those that may not know are a concise set of 10 strategic design criteria for quality architecture in older people's housing. The principles themselves, or the new proposed principles, don't deviate massively from the existing principles, but what they do is look to add in an element of dementia-ready design. I think the underlying theme here is dementia design shouldn't be anything out of the ordinary. It shouldn't be something that is added on. It should be included generally in good design in housing. When we look at a development of this nature that is specifically identified as providing housing for people living with dementia, we work to a certain set of design principles. And understanding the challenges, as I've already mentioned, about the residents is really probably the most key aspect to being able to design good places for people to live, places where people can regain some independence often, or at least not if regain, maintain their independence through doing very simple tasks that you and I probably take for granted, but can be lost due to the disability of this actual condition. I think it's really important that the buildings themselves are kept to a domestic and homely scale. And we do that by breaking them down into smaller units or homesteads, as we call them, of typically 8 to 10, maybe as many as 12 ensuite bedrooms within each block, with associated dining and lounge facilities to create small, homely environments for those people to live. Wayfinding is obviously really important, allowing people to not get frustrated by coming to dead ends in corridors, good social interaction opportunities is very, very good. And this development certainly allows that with the added aspect of the public library. There are secure lines within the building, and that's for residents' own security. But with the aid and assistance of staff, residents can use the whole of this building, including some of the more public areas, allowing them some sort of independence and choice. one other thing which often gets overlooked as well is actually providing good spaces for people to work in. The care sector, unfortunately, does have quite a high transient rate of care staff. And so providing really good facilities for staff can be a really important aspect to the design of the building. Stirling University are a well-known and acclaimed research facility. We've been very fortunate that we worked with them back in 2005, was our first specialist dementia residential building, and we worked with Stirling back then. And at the time, they were actually developing a system of accreditation, which is actually called you can gain gold, silver, bronze, or highly commended awards by going through their accreditation system. They've got 5 golden rules within that accreditation, which helps people living with dementia massively. And they're very simple things, really, when you break them down. There's nothing really special about what's done. So anybody looking to work in this area of people living with dementia, I would certainly recommend seeking out the Stirling University and the Dementia Services Development Centre, which is actually based there. They do design courses, which a number of our staff have been on in the past, which just helps to look at these various aspects when developing your buildings. One of the things that we always talk about is our experience across the whole housing sector, not just specifically dementia developments. And as I mentioned earlier, I think we very much believe that providing dementia-ready design should not be exclusive to specialist residential sectors. This should be ingrained across residential design for everyone. At the end of the day, we very strongly believe that good design is good design. And many of the awards that we have won for our buildings have not necessarily been for specialist dementia awards. They've actually been general architectural awards. They just happen to be in buildings that are specialist dementia facilities.
So I'll just join Paul and take you through the next couple of sections that will take you through giving context of how we approach the site and how we approach the project. So to begin the story, there was an outline planning application by Latham Architects for a scheme on the site that was approved in May 2015. And this project has a long history of different requirements, different brief. It's spanned over a long period of time. So that was one of the original earlier applications. And then we were commissioned through competition to then bring about the project that you see today. So we started with looking at the context of the site and understanding a bit about Belper and where it sits in relation to Derbyshire. So obviously Belper's located in Derbyshire County, and then we started to look a bit deeper of where Belper sits in the Derwent Valley and how it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And that was one of the key drivers for us and one of the key criteria that we wanted to look at and develop further. And as you can see, the aerial picture shows you the site itself was the former THORNTON'S chocolate factory site. So there was when we came to look at the site, there was already some derelict warehouse buildings, and then along Derwent Street there was the former THORNTON'S factory. Sorry, I think we've got a bit of a delay on our slides. The slideshow is quite large, so we may have a bit of
Sorry about it, Emma. It's not
time
really
lapse.
on,
No problem.
is it?
Don't know whether-
There we go.
A second, there we go. So the maps that you can see on the screen show where Belper sits in the World Heritage Site, and as you can see, the map with the green and the yellow, Belper sits right in the core of a World Heritage Site and right in a conservation area. So we kind of started from that point of view, knowing we needed to really understand the site, understand its history, its heritage, and its aspirations to design fully something that could really engage with the whole local community. So I think the next slide shows us, we started to have a look around the surrounding context of the site and the surrounding buildings, looking at what buildings were listed, what type of buildings were around the site. And as you can see, we had a real mix. There was some grade 2 listed buildings, and then we just found a real mix. Even though we were a town centre location, there's some converted residential properties along Bridge Street that house various commercial lets, such as hairdressers. But then you kind of on the back end of the site, as you go further down Derwent Street, you've got some of the older industrial units. And then we also had on one of the site approaches, we also had B&M Bargains and Morrison's on the other side. So it's a real eclectic mix, and because of it being a town centre location, we really wanted to focus in on sitting and bedding this building in its context, rather than looking like something it's just been sort of plonked on the site. So we did quite an extensive amount of research on surrounding context, buildings of importance, the heritage of the town, and the heritage of these buildings as well. So I think the next slide will show you some of the kind of heritage assets that sat close to the site. We had the Methodist Church, which is grade 2 listed. Obviously, we had the Thornton's, the former Thornton's factory that sat on our site along Derwent Street. Even though it wasn't listed, we felt that it was really important to keep a building like this, just to show the kind of the history of the site, the history of the town, how that kind of evolution of all these buildings, it seemed a shame to just demolish a building that's got such a history to it. So we wanted to kind of incorporate it into the design, and we'll go through a bit during the concept stage to show you how we did that. So it was really key to focus on these heritage assets, and then particularly we did quite an extensive surveys of the existing building, existing Thornton's factory, looking at what it looked like inside, looking at its structure, the shell we were left with. And as you can see, there was quite a lot of work to be done to make that building as good as it looks today.
I think it's fair to say, Emma, you did touch on it, that whilst this building wasn't listed, the local community really thought very fondly of the building and really wanted it to be retained. And despite how bad a condition that the building was really in, it's testament to the client that they actually took this on and allowed us to integrate it into the scheme, and I think has made the scheme far better for it.
Definitely. I mean, it would have been far easier to demolish this building, and as you can see, it was Paul mentioned at the beginning, it was a labour of love. So it really was key to try and keep that history. This building, even though it was a Thornton's factory, it was a Thornton's factory between 1947 and 2004. previous to that, it was actually a storage facility for Rolls-Royce's engines during World War II. So it had this really long history and that kind of change of ownership and change of use, but that shell remained, that it was really key to us that we needed to do something that was keeping the heritage asset of that building, but also being a kind of contemporary enhancement of it. And we wanted to really show where the new was being inserted, but retain the history of the old. And even before, before it was a Rolls-Royce factory, it was a blouse factory. So it's had a real history of manufacturing and industry. So that was really key for us. So then we started to move, following all of our site context analysis, we started to then move into the concept stage and started to put all of this analysis onto the site. So this first slide just takes you through the kind of key things we looked at: where the site's located. Its location is in Belper town centre. It's very close to the town centre. It's just further down the high street. It has close links to the train station. It sits on that corner edge where Bridge Street and Derwent Street meet. So as you can see on this site plan, it had quite a few different entrances and access points that we really wanted to look at. There's a pedestrian access off Bridge Street that links you straight from the town centre. You've obviously got the kind of the vehicle access and views down Derwent Street, quite key. And then you've got your vehicle and pedestrian access that's on the kind of south side that you see from B&M Bargains and past Morrison's. So all these access points were very crucial to us, of where we would locate buildings, what materials we would use, how they would look on each approach, because of it being sort of almost an inward-looking site. It sits at the back of these commercial properties that sit along Derwent Street, and then obviously we had to looked at kind of sun path and prevailing winds to sort of make sure we're making key views and giving the best natural light to the residents. So this slide shows our concept diagram for where we decided things could be best placed. And as you can see, the yellow bubble shows where we thought the specialist dementia care facility could sit, and that everything could feed off this green bubble that you see is the public square. That public square was really a key node that we wanted to place right in the centre of the site, and it links everything. It links where you walk into the site, where you park your car and you approach the building, and everything can feed off that public square. So that was kind of the main concept to how we approach the site. And also, obviously, we wanted to try and retain the existing building in whatever capacity we could at that stage. So everything kind of fed off that main node of that public square. So our approach to how we looked at the plan of how we wanted to lay things out, where we were going to locate different parts of the project, was we looked at the existing building housing Belper Library. One of the things that came out of the project was Belper Library currently sat in further down Bridge Street in an old existing building, no longer fit for purpose. It was about 3 floors, sort of books everywhere, became very inaccessible to certain users who needed, if you needed wheelchair access or if you had a buggy or a pram, the building was just no longer fit for purpose. So it became a really good thing that we could then get such a key local community need into this project, and it gave a kind of public face to the building. So in the former Thornton's factory, we looked at locating the library. We then had this main entrance off the public square where we looked to house the kitchen, any sort of dining facility. So we had this idea where you can see that dotted line is we've got a very public frontage onto that public square. And then we use it as a progressive privacy line. So then following from the left of that, we have our residence. So it feels much more homely, much more that is their home environment. And as Paul had mentioned earlier, we look at the idea is having about 8 to 10, max 12 bedrooms off a corridor, and always giving residents something to engage with them during that journey to and forth to their room, the ensuite bedrooms, where we have these lounge diners and we have glazed screens where you can see in and out, so you can see some activity. Everything is, we looked at positioning everything around a private courtyard. The idea was that all the bedrooms had natural light and had views onto a private courtyard, as well as then you could actually access the courtyard. So residents could get out and have a walk around, and it's a safe environment that they can be outside. And with the same then was created where we then back onto the existing Thornton's factory. So the idea was always having this sort of U shape, and then on the first floor, that same approach was obviously taken, and we just repeat the bedrooms, the ensuite bedrooms, all wrapping around a courtyard garden. So the idea is any views are then over landscaped areas. And then there's always this idea of that the residents have something to look at, something to engage with, and you don't come to dead ends. And as you can see from the plan, we kind of tried to always break up the plan so it's not a huge mass of building and accommodation, by introducing areas where it's glazed and open to looking out onto these courtyards. So the plan is always looks quite broken rather than one large building. And then we started to think about it in terms of massing and what would this building look like, height-wise, story-wise, and taking some context from what sits around the site. We wanted the building to have a residential feel. As Paul mentioned, our ethos for care environments is very much to have a homely feel, and we're always trying to think of residents as the user journey. So if you approach this building, we didn't want it to look like a huge mass of a building. So it's 2 stories in height, it's still got that domestic feel, and it's very much broken up into smaller elements so that it never feels like a institution. These views then are just where we try to start exploring what that public square would look like and how the buildings would sit onto the square. And as you can see, we retained the frontage of the former Thornton's factory along Derwent Street, and then we've tried to look at housing that library internally in that building, and then using glazing to then offer views into that public square, and keeping this kind of idea of transparency, and you can kind of see what's going on inside as well as you can see what's happening in the square. And then we have the idea is then the car park also leads onto that public square, so your approach by vehicle or by foot will always take you to the same place. There's a very identifiable point of entry, and that we wanted users to and family members to just always, it's very accessible to get into the building, and especially the library. You can start to see how we wanted to start to look at that, opening that up and creating a bit of transparency between the square and then what's happening into the library, so there's a bit of activity going on. So then we started to focus the design in more and start to really look at what the site plan would look like, where things would be positioned. So as you can see, the care centre itself is a U shape that wraps around these central courtyards. And then the library is housed within the existing, the former Thornton's factory. And then we have all our community use at the front of the building, and that sits onto the public square. And then we've got the car park also. So as you can see, the public square gives you pedestrian access from Bridge Street, and then the Thorntons, the library has that kind of key location where it sits on the corner and it sits along Derwent Street, so it's getting a bit of both. And then the residential accommodation is split into wings. Then we started to look at what this building would look like. So these are some of the visuals that we made for key views. So this is on your approach from Bridge Street as you approach the building. And as you can see, we looked at Derbyshire stone to bring in, looking back at the history of the site, key local materials, and also looking at those heritage assets that we'd identified earlier in the site analysis. We wanted the building to have a really be identifiable, be somewhere that Belper you would know the building the minute you approached it. It gave the local community something very engaging. And then you can see obviously the Thorntons factory there in the corner. And then this is a courtyard view. So we had the materials we used within the courtyard were brickwork, and we created interest in the brickwork by looking at different brick bonds and projecting bricks out. And as you can see, all of the windows for the residents in the courtyard are splayed to try and give as much natural light as possible and give them views into those courtyard gardens. And we've got some solar panels on the pitch roofs, as you can see. But again, we've just tried to everywhere create breaks in the building to give views out onto these courtyards and onto these garden spaces. This view is looking at the Thorntons factory from Derwent Street. So this gives you a view of Belper Library. And as you can see, the idea with it was to put a new glazed opening into the building. We wanted to be really, really show off actually where the new insertions went, rather than make a new fake mock version of the building. We wanted to highlight and emphasize actually this is a new contemporary enhancement to the building, and show off really that it's heritage asset, and not apologize for the fact that we've kept the building. We've shown the history of it, and then we wanted to create an active frontage along that glazed opening. This then just starts to take you into a bit about the library in particular. We worked closely with the library team for a number of months. In fact, it went on to years actually, of looking at how they wanted areas to be segregated off, where they wanted things to be positioned in the building. There's been some strategic movements, and we've got the kind of kids corner down in that bottom right hand side, keeping it away from the entrance, keeping sort of the noise away from some of the residents or family members who'll be going in and out of the building on the other community side. And also then we've got this area of local studies down in the corner. So it was really important to us where we position things, and then we looked at the kind of interior design of it to highlight the reason why they're positioned where they are, and give each area a very identifiable zone. So I think if you have a look at the some of the views, this is looking in the far corner, looking from the children's area. And as you can see, we wanted to bring some life and fun, looking at some bright colours and exposing all of the services, the lighting, the ductwork were all exposed, so that you can really see this double height space, and again celebrate the history of this building, rather than we could have put a plasterboard ceiling in that area and it would have just looked completely different, whereas we wanted to really give some height, give some presence to this building. And then we've got some featured timber fins that are acoustic, that wrap from the floor up the walls and wrap across the underside of the ceiling, to really emphasize the height of that building, to give some acoustic properties, and to give a real architectural feature. When you walk in there, it's identifiable immediately, and it just gives some life to that library. This is the view looking from the entrance. It's sort of quite a teenage area where they've got some computer screens where they can be on computers or iPads, and just looking across the extent of the building and just really looking at again how we've tried to and always expose the services in this area and highlight what's happening and show off the building, really, because we wanted to really show off the heritage asset that was already there. And this is one of the other views, just looking further at that children's corner and how we wanted to try and look at inbuilt booth seating, inbuilt seating for kids, and trying to break up those areas by actually the furniture integrated with the design rather than always added on. Some of the shelving was movable and curved to try and keep you flowing through the space, and then some of these we looked at booth pods where you could do some quieter working and just giving extra levels of quality spaces that were lacking in the existing library, and they just didn't have the space for it, and this building was to try and give them as much as possible. Hopefully it's done that.
Thanks so much. We'll just touch on a little bit of the construction process, and then finally just show some finished photographs of the building. So repurposing as much of the existing fabric was certainly a key element to continuing the story of the space, and also to tie the new building together with its context. Although the building, as we've mentioned, was not listed, our approach was really almost to treat it as if it were. And as such, there was a real desire to repurpose the space and celebrate the story of its past. We also worked very closely with the local conservation officer to develop sensitive and contextual design solutions. The new community library, as Emma has outlined, was housed in the refurbished factory building on Derwent Street, taking advantage of that double height volume and the character features of the historic building, which also gave incredibly good levels of natural light into the library space itself, with us creating almost a modern shop front into the building, to allow the books almost as exhibits within. The aim was always to create a space with a heart, and although the existing factory was in an advanced derelict state, through quite detailed surveys, it allowed us to identify the areas that could be rescued and could be repurposed. Materials, they were selected to have minimal impact on the environment during its manufacture. Local materials were also used, the local Derbyshire stone. This is a zinc shingle roof. All helped towards that sort of recyclable nature of the building. Utilising local materials and also local labour allowed the facades that were quarried from very locally at Stanton Moor, and with the local the artisans, the stonemasons that were actually used, give that fantastic overall impression of the final building. So I think this is the picture that we started with. This really sums up the whole building. The Ada Belfield Care Centre on the left with its public face, and the new Belper Library on the right. It is, after all, overall a community-focused scheme. It provides high-quality residential care and also this new public facility that hopefully breathes life back into the former derelict space, and also enhances its environment with this new public square. We've been very fortunate and have worked with Derbyshire County Council on similar schemes over the last probably 10 years. And we've developed a strong working relationship with them, and we certainly share their passion of raising standards for residential care homes to extend the levels of independence and protect the quality and dignity of life for our older generations. It's fair to say it was quite a healthy budget, but also we've got a client with a real vision and a dedication to improving people's lives. Specifically, the project manager from Derbyshire, Liz Eubank, and her colleague Jean Sturman have had such a strong commitment to providing quality of care and inspirational environments for elder residents. It really is. Without them, we really wouldn't be able to provide such fantastic buildings for the residents of Derbyshire. I put this image in really just to show two things. First of all, the use of the space, generous corridors with acoustic panels, all help to reduce that frustration factor of the residents, but also something that can often be a pet hate of architects is that when we hand the building over and you go back and you take some photographs and then you realise that the staff have laminated various pieces of paper and stuck them around the building. These laminated stickers on the entrance doors there were for a very specific reason. We handed the building over in the summer last year, right in the middle of the pandemic, and the building was actually used initially to function for 3 months, I think it was, as a small Nightingale hospital, treating COVID patients, actually before the residents that now inhabit it were even moved in. So again, that real community use of the building was quite nice to see, and hopefully they've now removed those laminated posters off the doors. The design is in line with the Stirling University design principles. It has achieved a gold standard for dementia design, and the scheme has a real focus on providing high quality environments with a focus on well-being and quality of life for the residents that use it. High levels of natural light, easily accessible landscape courtyards, and dementia-friendly layouts and specifications ensure that the residents and staff have a space that they can enjoy and be proud to inhabit. I think if just pausing on this image, there's so many things that I could point out which all help with people living with dementia. Maybe if we start with the bright yellow door just on the right-hand side, it doesn't have to be a yellow door, it just has to be an identifiable as a toilet facility. It's a memory trigger for people. You'll see that there's a lot of lights in that room. Again, they're all individually switched, so you can set different moods. There is a nurse call system alongside the bed head. The wardrobe, the furniture, you'll see that it's got glass fronted wardrobe, so you can actually see the clothes that are in there. The same with the drawers there, they're actually almost sort of semi-open fronted drawers, so residents can see what's in there, just trying to minimise those frustrations that can be experienced from day-to-day activities such as just dressing oneself. Drawing together the care home and the library and the community amenities has certainly come together and provided a holistic approach to the design, considering not only the environmental sustainability of the development, but also the economic and social sustainability to the local area. This really shows the large new glazed elements to the front elevation of the existing factory, placing the books on display, creating a strong presence to the street and the new public square, but also creating a welcoming and inclusive space for the community to use. This has just recently won the 2021 AJ Retrofit Award. The judges, very complimentary, said that, I'll just read out the quote, a sympathetic scheme that works well with the strong qualities of the existing building, creating impressive double height interior spaces. Good example of local authority client co-locating facilities and bringing some lovely old buildings back into use. We also submitted this for the McEwen Awards as well. We are a past winner of a McEwen Award, which is architecture for the community good, to paraphrase. And Hugh Pearman, a past editor of the RIBA Journal, wrote an article where he, again I'll quote, a rare piece of public patronage of good quality, alert to its context. It is designed as a piece of townscape as much as of a building, adding a small civic square, a place of refuge from the busy A6 road which runs north-south through the town close by. Designed to be seen from a distance and from above, viewed from up on the valley sides of the Derwent, it sits well with the grain and colours of the town. UNESCO need not worry. And then just to finish off this evening, our presentation, this is coming soon, as they say, to an area near you. This is our current development with Derbyshire County Council again. This is in Benley Avenue in Ilkeston. It formally started on site today, following some enabling works over the last 6 to 8 weeks. And this will provide 40 single bedded occupancy ensuite bedrooms within the first phase, and is scheduled to hand over in autumn 2022, with a further phase 2 set to follow to provide 66 extra care apartments and 18 two-bed bungalows. So we were joking earlier, and Michael said, well, maybe you can come back and do a third speech once, a presentation once that this building is handed over, and we'd be delighted to come back and do that.
Thank you very much, Paul.
You're welcome.
That's fantastic. Before I hand over to Hannah to do the Q&A, and I think she's got her own question as well, I just wanted to ask, we had a conversation before we went live about Hogway and how that the Dutch have a very unique way of doing things there. I know that they combined the function of a primary school with their care home, didn't they? And you kind of done a similar recipe with the library and the care home. What challenges do you think we have to overcome now? You know, we're seeing great projects like yours happen. Are we there yet? Are we still got a way to go?
I think we've still got a way to go. We are getting there. We are actively promoting, as others are, multi-generational developments. Maybe not to the level of integrating schools with residential care, but certainly looking at the way that young professionals engage really well with the older generation. There's kind of a synergy between those two age groups. The older adults like to impart their wealth of knowledge, and the younger sort of maybe young nurses or school teachers, they have a natural ability to actually help and look after the elderly residents. So we're looking at a couple of schemes at the moment where we're hopeful that we will get off the ground this multi-generational aspect, because I think there's definitely something to be there. I think going that further step, as you say, sort of looking at what other countries are doing, there's some great things being done. Whether we're quite ready to integrate with a school environment on the same site, I think we've got a way to go. Yeah. We have actually this new development in Ilkeston. There is an existing sports pitch, and we are developing and enhancing those facilities. And again, the client was very keen to develop that, because they can see the benefit from the residents interacting with the younger people using those sports facilities and just watching and engaging. So hopefully we will get there.
It sounds as if there's a potential recipe in the mix there to help regenerate areas that require, regeneration. I know Ilkeston, I know it well, I know Belper well, and it seems as if this is going to be a stepping stone in that process. Yeah. Just one final thing, is there some connection with chocolate and dementia care homes? Because I know in Leeds, there's the Chocolate Works, isn't there? Which was a care home, a dementia care home. And then you mentioned this was the Thornton'S factory, and I don't know whether there's some feel-good factor in that. And I know on the latest Cadbury's adverts, they're all kind of like snippets of senior citizens telling their stories from the times of the past. And I just didn't know if there was some connection with chocolate.
Not that I'm aware of, Michael. You may have stumbled across something.
We may have. Right, I'll pass you on to Hannah now. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks.
Thanks, Paul and Emma, for your presentation. That was really great. So I've got a few questions and comments that I thought we could run through. So I've got one from Aisha. She says, when you mentioned the local community was very fond of the building, did you have a feed-forward method in place that informed your design process? And more generally, do you have such feed-forward and feedback mechanisms in place to inform your practice?